October is the month of Halloween, a time of laughter, costumes, and candy-filled dreams. Children count down the days, begging their parents for ghostly costumes and planning their trick-or-treat routes. The streets glow with jack-o'-lanterns, and the night hums with excitement. But not all Halloween stories end in joy. Every year, strange things happen. Candies that shouldn't exist, houses where laughter turns to screams, and shadows that move when no one's there. People still talk about them. They still swear they're true. And the stories, well, they go like this. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, where Halloween was always a big deal. Costumes, trick-or-treating, haunted houses, the whole thing. But the Halloween that year was different. It was the year I learned that some legends are real and some pumpkins should never be carved. That year, my father, John, went all out with decorations. He loved Halloween more than any grown man probably should. Spider webs, fake graves, hanging skeletons. But his pride and joy was always the jack-o'-lantern. Every year, he tried to outdo himself. This time, he said he wanted to make something special. Something that looked alive. A few days before Halloween, he took me to this strange little shop on the edge of town. The place looked older than it had any right to be. Dusty shelves, the smell of dried herbs, and candles that had melted into grotesque shapes. That's where he found it. A pumpkin unlike any I have ever seen. It was perfectly round, but had two sharp, horn-like protrusions on the top, like devil's horns. Its color was deeper than orange, almost the shade of dried blood. When Dad reached for it, the old shopkeeper stepped forward. His voice was low and gravelly. "That one shouldn't be carved. It's cursed. They call it the devil's pumpkin." Dad chuckled. "Cursed pumpkins? Come on, old man. That's a hell of a sales pitch." But the shopkeeper didn't smile. Some things weren't meant to hold a candle inside. We left with the pumpkin anyway. Dad never took superstition seriously. That night, we carved it together on the porch. When he sliced the top off, a strange smell seeped out. Sweet and rotten, like something that had been dead too long. I remember wrinkling my nose. Dad laughed. "Smells like it's been waiting all year for Halloween." We carved the face. A twisted grin, eyes like gashes, teeth jagged and uneven. It looked alive when we finished. When Dad lit the candle inside, the flame flickered as though the pumpkin was breathing. "This," he said proudly, "is going to scare the hell out of the neighborhood." We went to bed around 10. The jack-o'-lantern glowed outside our window, its light pulsing in the dark. Around midnight, the house went pitch black. Every light, every sound, gone. Even the clock on the wall stopped ticking. Then came the noise, a slow, scraping sound from outside. Something heavy moving through the yard. Mom woke first. "John, do you hear that?" Dad muttered something and grabbed his coat. "Stay here." I watched from the stairs as he opened the front door. The wind howled, sending dead leaves swirling across the lawn. The jack-o'-lantern was still there, glowing faintly. Only now the light looked different, brighter, like fire trapped behind flesh. The carved grin seemed wider. Dad stepped closer. "What the hell?" Before he could finish, the pumpkin split down the middle with a sharp crack. From inside came a sound like a scream, high, wet, and human. Then, a hand. Bloody, sinewy, clawed, shot out, and latched onto his wrist. He screamed. Mom came running, shrieking his name. The thing yanked him forward. He tried to pull free, but the more he struggled, the tighter the grip became. I'll never forget the sound, the crunch of bone, the tearing of flesh. The pumpkin's grin warped as something inside began to move. Two hollow eyes opened, glowing from within, and from the slit of its mouth came a voice, low and hungry. "You carved me free. You carved me free." Mom grabbed me and ran, but before we reached the door, Dad's screams stopped. When we turned back, he was gone. The jack-o'-lantern was whole again, its light flickering gently like nothing had happened. By morning, there was no sign of my father. The police found blood on the porch and drag marks that disappeared halfway down the yard. The pumpkin sat exactly where he'd left it, the candle still burning inside. No one ever found his body. That Halloween was the last time anyone in town carved pumpkins. The old shop closed down not long after. No one knew what happened to the owner. But every few years, someone swears they've seen a jack-o'-lantern glowing on our old lawn. Its twisted grin flickering in the dark, as if waiting for someone to light the candle again. And if you listen closely, just before midnight, they say you can still hear it whisper, "Carve me free. Carve me free." I'll never forget the Halloween of 1981. Back then, I was living in New York City, a wild, restless time when every night felt like a movie. That Halloween, my friends and I were invited to a huge costume party in a brownstone near the East Village. The streets were alive with laughter, sirens, and the rustle of cheap plastic capes in the wind. When we walked in, the place was already packed. Music blaring, lights strobing, everyone lost behind their masks. The air smelled of cheap liquor and pumpkin candles. It was chaos in the best way. "Look at this crowd," my friend Anna shouted over the music, raising her glass of red wine. "This is what Halloween's supposed to be, wild and crazy." We laughed, toasted, and dove into the night. Witches, vampires, zombies, all swaying together in a blur of fake blood and glitter. No one knew anyone, and that was the beauty of it. At least, that's what we thought. Around midnight, I noticed him. He was tall, dressed completely in black. From the gloves to the heavy coat that looked out of place indoors. His mask wasn't like the others. It wasn't funny or flashy. Just blank, pale and featureless, like a death mask. He didn't dance, didn't drink, didn't move like everyone else. He just stood there, still as stone, watching. "Hey," I nudged Anna. "You know that guy?" She followed my gaze, shrugged. "No idea. Probably someone's friend." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The masked man began weaving through the crowd, silent and steady. The music thumped, laughter echoed, and no one noticed him slide a hand into his coat pocket. When the strobe lights flashed again, I saw it metal, glinting in his hand. A knife. Then came the scream. It sliced through the music, sharp and real. The man nearest him staggered backward, clutching his chest, blood soaking through his costume. For one split second, the room froze. And then panic exploded. People ran in every direction, knocking over tables, tripping on costumes, shrieking. The man in black just stood there, knife dripping, head tilted slightly, as if admiring his own work. And then he smiled. The mask didn't move, but I swear I saw the curve of a grin behind it. "Run!" Anna screamed, grabbing my hand. We pushed through the crowd, stumbling toward the door. When I dared to look back, he was gone, vanished, like smoke. By the time the police arrived, the music had stopped, the blood had dried, and no one could describe him. Every witness remembered something different. His height, his voice, his mask, but nothing matched. No fingerprints, no leads. They called it the Halloween party murder. For months, New York couldn't stop talking about it. But the killer was never caught. The police said maybe it was a random act. Maybe the killer slipped out into the city and disappeared. But some people, especially those who were there that night, believed something else. Because each year, on Halloween, someone claims to see him again. A tall figure in black, standing outside that same brownstone, watching through the window. And if you listen closely, past the laughter, past the music, you might still hear it, the faint echo of that scream. A reminder that sometimes the mask never comes off, and the party never really ends. You hear a lot of stories in small towns, especially around Halloween. Most of them are harmless. Ghosts, witches, old houses that breathe when the wind hits just right. But the one about the Halloween parade, that one isn't like the others. It started when my friend Danny brought it up one night at the diner. He leaned across the table, eyes wide, his voice low like he was afraid someone else might hear. "You guys ever heard about the town's secret Halloween parade?" We laughed at first. "A parade? You mean like floats and candy?" I asked. Danny shook his head. "No, not that kind. This one only happens after midnight. The people in it, they wear old clothes, masks that don't move, and they never speak. They just walk, slowly, in silence. No music, no cheers, just the sound of the wind." Our buddy Dave scoffed. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Probably just a bunch of drunks in costumes." Danny didn't laugh. "If you think it's a joke, why don't you come with me tonight?" And that was how we ended up standing on Main Street. At first, nothing happened. The town was unusually quiet, even for that late hour. No traffic, no chatter, not even a dog barking, just the faint rustle of dry leaves scraping across the pavement. Then, the air shifted. It wasn't wind. It was colder, heavier, the kind of chill that creeps beneath your clothes. The street lights flickered once, and that's when we saw them. They appeared at the far end of the street, walking in perfect formation. Slow, measured steps. Each one wore tattered, antique clothing that looked a century out of date. Their faces were hidden behind masks, porcelain, cracked and pale under the streetlight. But what froze me in place wasn't how they looked. It was the sound. Their footsteps weren't footsteps at all. It was a hollow, dragging noise, like shoes scraping across stone from somewhere deep underground. Danny whispered, "This doesn't feel right." One of the others, Alf, muttered, "Is this a prank or something? They're just trying to freak us out. Let's get a closer look." We followed him, moving toward the parade. The closer we got, the more I noticed the smell. Damp earth, rot, and something else I couldn't place. The figures kept walking, faces blank, masks unblinking. Then one of them, a woman in a long, torn dress, turned her head. Her mask was cracked in half, revealing the gray skin underneath. But the eyes, God, those eyes were hollow sockets, black and empty. She stopped walking. Then she smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. The mask didn't move, but her face beneath it did. a slow stretch of skin, tearing at the corners of her mouth. She raised a hand, long and thin like dried branches, and pointed straight at Dave. Danny screamed, "Run! Now!" We bolted. None of us looked back until we reached the car. Our lungs burned. Our hands shook as we slammed the doors and locked them. The engine roared to life, and we peeled out of there, tires screeching against the empty road. In the rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse of them. The procession still moving, unbothered, marching quietly down Main Street as if nothing had happened. We didn't talk the whole ride home. Not that night, not the next day either. But a week later, Danny called me. His voice was shaking. "You need to come over," he said. "It's about Dave." When I got there, he handed me the newspaper. On the front page was the headline, "Local man missing after Halloween night." It was Dave. They'd found his car on the edge of town. Doors locked, engine still running, but no trace of him inside. And then Danny told me what he'd found out. Years ago, before we were born, the town held a Halloween parade every year. But one October, a fire broke out during the event. Floats, costumes, everything went up in flames. Dozens of people died, burned alive in their masks. The tradition was never revived. At least, not officially. Every Halloween since, locals have whispered about them. The dead marchers who walk again at midnight, replaying their final parade, searching for new souls to join their ranks. Some say if one of them ever looks right at you, you're already chosen. Danny and I don't go out on Halloween anymore. We keep the lights off, the curtains closed, and we never, ever look outside after midnight. Because sometimes, when the wind picks up and the night grows still, I swear I can hear it again. The sound of feet that don't belong to the living. Halloween night has always been my favorite. That year, my friends and I were heading to a big party downtown, and I wanted something different. Not cute, not sexy. Something that would make people stop talking when I walked in. We spent the afternoon raiding thrift stores and costume shops, but everything looked cheap or plastic. Then I saw it, tucked away in the corner of an antique store on Maple Avenue. A mask. It wasn't your typical Halloween mask. It was porcelain, yellowed with age, its painted lips cracked into a faint, warped smile. The face looked almost human, but wrong. The shop owner, an old man with watery eyes, told me it once belonged to a woman who disappeared decades ago. He said it in a half-joking, half-warning tone. "Guess she left her face behind," he muttered. My friend Lily wasn't amused. "That thing's creepy as hell, Denise. You really gonna wear it?" "That's the point," I told her. Halloween's supposed to be scary. That night, I slipped on my costume, a sleek black dress, gloves, the mask. The second it touched my skin, a wave of cold washed over me, deep enough to make me shiver. It felt like the mask was breathing. No, pulling. Drawing in the warmth from my body. "This feels weird," I murmured, staring at myself in the mirror. But damn, it looked good. The mask fit perfectly, as if it had been molded for me. When I walked into the party, everyone turned. I was an instant hit. People laughed, posed for photos, asked where I'd found it. The attention was electric. I smiled under the mask. Until the headache started. It came slow, pulsing behind my eyes, followed by a ringing in my ears. The room blurred, voices stretching and bending around me. "Denise, you okay?" Lily's voice cut through the noise. "You look kinda pale." I can't take it off," I said, fingers digging at the edges. My nails scraped my own skin, but it felt like the porcelain had fused with me, seamless, like part of my flesh. Lily reached for me, but I panicked and ran through the crowd, down a hallway, into the bathroom. I slammed the door, flicked on the light, and grabbed the mask with both hands. "Come off!" I screamed, tearing at it. The mirror fogged with my breath. My reflection warped, the face behind the mask twisting, eyes moving independently of mine. Something else was looking out through the slits, something that didn't blink. Then I heard it, a whisper so close it could have been inside my skull. "This is my face. You can't take it from me." My vision fractured. The air smelled like iron, thick, coppery. My body shook uncontrollably. I clawed at the porcelain until my fingers went numb. "Help me!" I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My voice stuck in my throat, trapped like the breath of a drowning person. The mask smiled. Not me, the mask. Its lips curled upward, smooth and deliberate. "Now," it said, "this body is mine." Title: The Candyman. I was only 8 years old when I learned that monsters didn't always wear masks on Halloween. Sometimes they wore a father's smile. It was 1974, in a quiet Texas suburb. The streets were alive that night. Kids in plastic costumes running door to door. Laughter echoing under orange porch lights. Everyone trusted everyone. Back then, Halloween felt safe. But not in our house. My neighbor, Ronald O'Brien, was the kind of man you'd wave to over a white picket fence. A Sunday school teacher, a family man, the sort of guy who smiled a little too wide. He lived just a few doors down from us with his wife and 2 kids, Elizabeth and Timothy. That Halloween, Ronald took the kids trick-or-treating. I saw them leaving, Timothy dressed as a cowboy, swinging his little candy bucket like a trophy. Ronald gave me a friendly nod before they disappeared into the night. Hours later, I woke to sirens. The news spread before sunrise. Timothy O'Brien was dead. They said he'd eaten a piece of candy as soon as he got home. A long Pixie Stix. A few bites later, he screamed that it tasted bitter. Within minutes, he was vomiting, convulsing, gasping for air. His father held him as he died, whispering, "It's going to be okay, son." But it wasn't okay. It never was. The police investigation tore through the neighborhood. Parents dumped their kids' candy in panic. Reporters swarmed the street, and everyone whispered the same question: who would poison Halloween candy? At first, no one suspected Ronald. Not the man who'd just lost his son. Not the grieving father who cried in front of cameras. But grief can be a mask too, one that hides something rotten underneath. The truth came out piece by piece. The police discovered that Ronald had recently taken out massive life insurance policies on both of his children just weeks before Halloween. He'd crushed cyanide into candy, sealing it back up with meticulous care, and handed it out to make it look random. 5 poisoned candies, 4 untouched, 1 fatal. When they arrested him, Ronald didn't even look surprised. In court, he barely flinched when they read the verdict: death by lethal injection. The press gave him a name that still makes my stomach turn: the Candyman. Timothy's funeral was the first I ever attended. I remember the tiny coffin, the sound of the pastor's voice cracking mid-prayer, and the faint, sugary smell of candy still clinging to my jacket. I didn't touch Halloween candy for years after that. None of us did. But some nights, when October rolls around and the air smells faintly of caramel and plastic masks, I still think about that boy. His wide grin, the cowboy hat slipping down his forehead, and the way he trusted his father without hesitation. And every year, when kids come knocking on my door for candy, I look at the bright wrappers and wonder if they know the story. If they've ever heard the whisper that started in our town and spread across America. Check your candy, because monsters don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they hand you something sweet and tell you to take a bite. Halloween night had always been my favorite. Cool air, quiet streets, the faint echo of laughter fading into the dark. My husband Mark and I were finally relaxing on the couch after putting the kids to bed. Outside, the last trick-or-treaters were heading home, their voices distant, the neighborhood slipping into calm. Then came the knock. It was soft at first, 3 deliberate taps against the door. At this hour? Probably some kid who missed our house. But something in the sound made me uneasy. It wasn't the playful rapping of a child. It was slow, heavy. I walked to the door and opened it just a few inches. A tall man stood on the porch. His face was hidden behind a cracked, dirty mask, and his clothes looked torn, mud-streaked, hanging off his frame like they didn't belong to him. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, breathing. Can I help you?" I asked, my voice catching in my throat. "Nothing." Mark came up behind me, irritation in his tone. "Hey buddy, you lost or something? We're done for the night." Still, nothing. Then, he raised his hand, slowly, stiffly. His finger pointed past us, toward the hallway that led deeper into our house. I froze when I saw it. Dark, wet stains dripping down his wrist. Blood. Mark's voice sharpened. "Okay, pal, that's enough." He reached for the door, slamming it shut. The moment the latch clicked, the knocking started again. Harder, louder. The whole door shook under the force. "Call the police," I yelled. Mark grabbed his phone, but the screen stayed black. "No service," he muttered. What the hell? The pounding grew violent. Fists, maybe both hands, hammering, rattling the hinges. The kids stirred upstairs. I pressed my ear against the wood, and the sound stopped, abruptly. Silence. The kind that eats up all the air in the room. I took a shaky breath and glanced through the peephole. The man was still there, only now he was closer, so close that all I could see was the mask. And beneath it, through the crack at the bottom, I saw a smile, rotten teeth, slick with blood, stretching impossibly wide. Then, nothing. No more knocking. No footsteps. No sound at all. Mark whispered, "He's gone." But he wasn't. A low laugh echoed from somewhere inside the house. We turned toward the hallway, the one he'd pointed to. The sound was coming from there. Mark grabbed a kitchen knife, his knuckles white. "Stay behind me." We crept toward the kids' room. The door was open. The beds were empty. The window locked from the inside. And on the wall, written in something dark and wet, were the words, "You shouldn't have opened the door." Mark shouted their names, running from room to room, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at those words, feeling something warm drip from the ceiling onto my hand. Blood. The laughter came again. This time, closer. By the time the police arrived, the house was empty. No signs of struggle, no footprints except our own. But every Halloween since, we find the same thing waiting on our porch. Muddy footprints leading to the door and stopping right outside. Sometimes, when the wind hits just right, I swear I can hear him breathing, waiting for someone else. to open the door. When my family and I moved into the farmhouse on Willow Creek Road, we thought we'd finally found the perfect home. It sat on several acres of land, tucked away behind old oak trees, quiet and isolated, exactly the kind of peaceful life we'd been dreaming of. But from the moment we stepped inside, something felt wrong. "This place feels stuffy," I remember saying to my wife Sarah as we unpacked boxes. She nodded, "And the floors, they won't stop creaking. It's like the house doesn't want us here." Every time we walked, the wooden boards groaned and popped beneath our feet, like the house was whispering something we couldn't quite understand. Still, we brushed it off as part of the old place's charm, except for one room. At the end of the long upstairs hallway was a door that always seemed colder than the rest. No matter how many times Sarah cleaned it, the air inside was damp, heavy, and filled with the smell of wet earth. "It's like the ground itself is breathing," she said once, scrubbing at the walls. Our daughter Lily refused to go near that room. Whenever she passed it, she'd run down the hall with her hands over her eyes. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked one night. She clutched my arm tightly. "There's a lady in there," she whispered. "She watches me. She wears a white dress, and her eyes are empty." Sarah and I exchanged a look. I tried to smile. "It's just your imagination, honey. There's no one in that room." But that night, I woke up to the sound of whispering. At first, I thought it was Sarah talking in her sleep, but when I turned, she was out cold. The whispering continued, soft, rhythmic, like someone murmuring just beyond the door. I got up, grabbed the flashlight, and stepped into the hallway. The sound was coming from the end, her room. The door was cracked open, just a sliver. Cold air poured out, carrying that awful smell of dirt and decay. Against my better judgment, I pushed it open. The moment I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me. "Hello?" My voice shook. No answer, just a slow dragging sound across the floorboards, like something heavy was crawling toward me. The beam of my flashlight flickered, and I felt it before I saw it, something cold and thin wrapping around my wrist. It was a hand. "Let me go," I yelled, pulling back, but the grip only tightened. It felt impossibly strong, the fingers digging into my skin. And then, out of the corner of the room, she appeared. A woman in a long white gown, drenched as if she'd just climbed out of a grave. Her face was pale and hollow, her eyes black pits, and her mouth hung open in a silent scream. "Who are you?" I whispered. She didn't answer. She just stepped closer, slowly, soundlessly, until I could feel her icy breath on my face. I wrenched free and stumbled backwards, slamming into the door. Somehow it opened and I ran. By the time I reached our bedroom, I was shaking. "We're leaving," I told Sarah, my voice barely a whisper. "Tomorrow. I don't care where. We're not staying here another night." A week later, we moved out. When I finally looked into the house's history, I found the truth. Decades ago, the farmhouse had belonged to a woman who vanished without a trace. People said her husband buried her body somewhere on the property, though no one ever found it. Now, the farmhouse still stands, empty and silent at the edge of Willow Creek Road. But the locals say if you drive by late at night, you can see her standing in the upstairs window, her white dress glowing in the dark, waiting for someone new to move in, waiting for someone to take her place.